Good evening, everyone. I'm Lissy Bastien with your JCN News for this Wednesday, September 23rd. Thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Dr. Hugh is urging Bahamians to continue to wear masks as he presented the COVID-19 pandemic resolution in the House of Assembly this afternoon. Dr. Minnis highlighted the importance of masks, noting that a mask in some cases is more effective than a vaccine. The Prime Minister also announced commercial and social activities can resume as normal on the following islands with social distancing protocols in place: Andros, Acklins, Crooked Island, Long Key, the Berry Islands, Bimini, Cat Island, Eleuthera, Exuma, Mayaguana, Inagua, and Grand Bahama. Dr. Minnis notes that these islands will not have a curfew. However, Grand Bahama's curfew will remain in place from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. As for Abaco, Dr. Minnis says that beaches can open until 10 p.m. Weddings can be held on islands in churches following the social distance protocols put in place by the Ministry of Health. The Prime Minister adds that funerals can now also be held in churches on islands, including Abaco and New Providence, following the social distancing protocols put in place. Gyms are also allowed to open following the Ministry of Health protocols. Dr. Minnis says that the government will present a plan very soon to remove domestic and international quarantine, noting, however, that the second wave of the virus is still not over and it's likely that a third wave can occur. He acknowledged that the government has made some mistakes during this pandemic. However, he pledged that the government will continue to do better. House of Assembly resumed this morning with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest leading off debate on the bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Ownership Act, a legislation that would safeguard the financial services industry. Our Leah Cooper has the details.
House members debating the Registration of Beneficial Ownership Amendment Bill this morning in the House of Assembly. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest says this is not the first time the government walked the thin line between balancing business, sustainability, and compliance with the international regulations in an attempt to safeguard the country's financial services industry. He adds that from the early 90s, the country has endured some intense scrutiny under watchdogs like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the Financial Action Task Force with respect to our legal framework to curtail financial crimes.
Like other financial centers in the Caribbean, the Bahamas has had to guard against the encroachment of its sovereignty, disguised as calls for greater transparency and cooperation by international organizations and governments alike. We have had to commit resources, scarce, sacred resources that we really do not have, at both a high financial and human capital cost, to combat the stigmatization of our financial services industry as the bastion of money derived from illegal activity. Oftentimes, in response to our adoption of international financial standards, we are accused of simply acquiescing to the dicta of advanced economies and countries by those who do not, and sometimes by those that should know and do know of the real damage that just the mere whisper of the possibility of a blacklisting can do to our financial services industry and, by extension, the second pillar of our economy at large.
The Deputy Prime Minister adds that if the Bahamas is to remain the global financial ecosystem, it must comply with the rules that operate in that environment, if only to be able to support arguments on the legitimacy of the country's industry and to decry the use of blacklisting and other punitive actions by certain countries to coerce the country to try to expand the parameters of the accepted standard.
And so, Mr. Speaker and members of this Honorable Chamber, this bill to amend the Register of Beneficial Ownership Act that we are debating today is another weapon in our arsenal to counter the narrative that the Bahamas financial services industry operates outside of the regulatory bounds accepted by the international financial community. More importantly, Mr. Speaker, it is to protect against the abuse of our financial services industry by persons attempting to use our financial institutions and products to avoid declaring or to abate the true extent of their financial assets to the relevant authorities in their home countries, or as a shield to hide or launder illicit assets.
The bill also provides for the specific inclusion of the nonprofit organizations limited by shares and the segregated account companies, or SACs, and the definition of entities covered by the Act.
This bill will address a major recommendation by the Financial Action Task Force with respect to ensuring that no person is able to hide their identity through the use of a Bahamian entity. There was consultation and consensus on the provisions of the bill with our key financial services stakeholders, including the Association of International Banks and Trust Companies, the Bahamas Financial Services Board, and the Securities Commission as Inspector of Financial and Corporate Service Providers under the FCSP Act. There is unanimous agreement that the bill, once passed, will bolster our efforts to be removed from the FATF's ICRG process. Due to COVID-19 related travel restrictions, the FATF has not been able to conduct the in-country assessment of our AML-CFT regime, which is the last hurdle to being removed from the FATF's list of countries with strategic AML-CFT deficiencies. Removal from the FATF's list has been cited by the EU as a requirement for them to not include the Bahamas in the impending EU AML-CFT list of third countries.
Reporting for JCN News, I'm Leah Cooper.
Meantime, opposition Shadow Minister of Finance and Deputy Leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, Chester Cooper, slamming the government, charging that international bodies are once again the goalposts, which he says is the hallmark of the minister-led administration. The Exuma and Ragged Island MP says that the opposition will support the bill. However, there are some concerns which speaks to industry issues in general. Mr. Cooper adds that 3 years in, he has little confidence that this minister administration will do any such thing, and says what he has noticed was incompetence, floundering and running from pillar to post, snapping to the attention of the big boys under threat who placed the country on arbitrary gray and black lists. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs announcing the unfortunate deaths of 2 Bahamians residing abroad. In the first case, Mr. Kenny Ramming, a Bahamian student studying in Houston, Texas, was shot in the chest on September 18th around 10 p.m. after responding to a rock being thrown at his window. In a release, the ministry indicates it has been advised by the Honorary Consul of the Bahamas in Houston, Texas, that the police have not yet made an arrest as they do not have any suspects at this time. A motive for the incident has also been undetermined. In the second case, Ms. Judith Taylor, a Bahamian living and working near Toronto, Canada, was reportedly struck by a UPS Express train on September 7th. Toronto police received a report of the collision near the area of Western Road and Black Creek Drive. The spokesperson for the Toronto Police Service said the death will be treated as suspicious and anticipate that their preliminary investigation report will be completed by the end of this week. The ministry requests that the public keep family and loved ones of the deceased in their prayers during this difficult and tragic time. 3 men connected to that multi-million-dollar drug bust near Barry Terry Exuma early Monday morning were arraigned in Magistrates Court this afternoon. Our Laurencia Smith was at the Nassau Street Court and files this report.
Omar Chisholm and 37-year-old Andrew Pratt and Adrian Mackey stood before Deputy Chief Magistrate Andrew Forbes for charges related to that $3.4 million drug seize after they were arrested following an hour and 15-minute long high-speed chase near Barry Terry Exuma early Monday morning. The men faced 6 charges, including conspiracy to possess dangerous drugs with the intent to supply, possession of dangerous drugs with the intention to supply, conspiracy to import dangerous drugs, the importation of dangerous drugs, assault with a dangerous instrument, and causing harm. According to court documents, the crimes allegedly took place between the 17th and the 21st of September at Barry Terry Exuma. The accused, being concerned together and with others, did conspire to possess a quantity of dangerous drugs, namely Indian hemp, with the intent to supply. That on the 21st of September, also while at Barry Terry, being concerned together with others, were found to possess a quantity of dangerous drugs, namely Indian hemp, with the intent to supply. and between the 17th and the 21st of September did conspire to import dangerous drugs to the country. On September 21st, they did import into the country dangerous drugs. Now, during the seize, an officer was injured, resulting in the trio being charged with count number 5, assault with a dangerous instrument. On the 21st of September, while at Barra Tariq Zuma being concerned together, unlawfully assaulted Sergeant 2009 Newton, Corporal 3566 Smith, and Corporal 3633 Robinson with a dangerous instrument, and count number 6 harm. At sometime around 2:30 a.m. on the 21st of September, being concerned together did unlawfully cause harm to Sergeant Newton. The defendants all pled not guilty to all 6 counts, and the Deputy Chief Magistrate was not able to grant bail. However, the magistrate noted to the defendants that they were able to apply to the Supreme Court for bail. Of the trio, Chisholm was the only defendant that was represented by a counsel, Ian Cargill. The trial date is set for the 25th of February 2021. Meantime, they have been remanded to the Department of Corrections. I'm Laurentia Smith.
You're watching JCN News. When we return, 49 new cases of COVID-19, PAHO warning of misinformation on vaccines, and police need your help in locating 3 missing teenagers. Those stories and more when we return.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.